Welcome to Healing Out Loud with Gina Lynn. This is a space for honest conversations about neurodivergence, trauma, healthcare, advocacy, and healing. If you've ever felt dismissed, misunderstood, or alone in your experience, you're in the right place. Thank you for being here. Let's start healing out loud together. Today I want to talk about something that's not only frustrating, but very problematic and very real. I want to talk about why neurodivergent and trauma-affected patients get dismissed in medical settings. I've lived it my entire life, and if you've lived it too, then you already know how hard it is to walk away from a medical appointment feeling like what you tried to say never fully landed. It also means you know what it feels like to leave feeling unheard. You know what it feels like to know something's wrong, but not be able to make someone else understand it. I'd like to tell you about a recent experience I had with Billy. Now, Billy and I met in special education in high school. We fell madly in love and got married. Not because we had to, but because that's what young love does sometimes. We never had children together, and the truth is, we were too young and too immature for marriage. You could not have told us then. We wouldn't have believed it. Anyway, life was not simple. It moved, years passed, and it did not unfold the way we had imagined. But now, here we are in our 60s. These days, we help take care of each other and advocate for each other. His strengths are my weaknesses, and my strengths are his weaknesses. Somehow it works. We really do complement each other. A couple of months ago, Billy got very sick. In fact, he told me it was the worst he'd ever felt in his entire life. We ended up taking him to the ER, which is not something we normally do. But in spite of how sick he was, at that first ER visit, the seriousness of his condition was not recognized. We left without real answers. We were carrying fear and frustration. We had that awful feeling of knowing he was still really sick, but nobody was doing anything. Well, we got home, and as his condition worsened, we had to keep pushing. We had to keep advocating and keep trying to make others understand that this was serious. One of the doctor's appointments after the ER visit went horribly wrong because of an untrained medical assistant. She shamed us so badly that poor Billy laid there for almost a week before I could get him back to the ER. We'll talk about that experience on another podcast because it's a perfect example of what can happen when neurodivergent and trauma-affected people are misunderstood and the damage that the misunderstandings can cause. I started doing my own research. I figured out that it was a bile duct blockage. So before the next ER visit, I constructed a letter explaining that we were neurodivergent, how we struggled to communicate, what was happening with Billy. I included, only the facts. I included his symptoms and the best way that, he could communicate and by what I visually saw. Well, that letter changed everything. Suddenly, we were understood and the process was easier. Suddenly, the care experience was different, and I mean very different. We were spoken to in a way we could understand. They made sure we understood. They were more patient with us. They reworded questions so that we could follow what they were asking. They actually acted like they cared this time. We weren't wasting their time. We felt heard. And you know what? We were heard. Same symptoms, same hospital, different outcome. The difference? Communication. Billy was admitted to the hospital during that ER visit, and it was finally confirmed that he had severe gallbladder disease with stones blocking his bile duct. He needed a procedure to remove the stones from his bile duct, and then the next day he went in for a gallbladder surgery. Most of his gallbladder was removed, but it had been diseased for so long that it had actually started to fuse to the surrounding tissue. During surgery, it began to tear. Once that happened, the decision was made to stop because it had become unsafe. He had to live with a drain tube for a few weeks afterwards due to this. What stays with me is this. The medical crisis was real, but so was the communication crisis. The difference between being dismissed and being understood can change everything. And I think one of the biggest reasons neurodivergent and trauma-affected patients get dismissed is because so much of healthcare depends on communication. I mean, of course. I mean, it makes sense. You know, doctors and nurses, they need information. They need the details. They need the descriptions. They need the timelines. You know, they've got questions that they need answers to. But the problem is, not all patients communicate the same way. And some of us struggle a lot more than people realize. You know, neurodivergent and trauma-affected patients may have trouble describing pain. Sometimes the brain only registers pain without clearly sorting it into neat categories. You know, that can make it hard to explain whether the pain is sharp or dull or burning, cramping, pressure, or something else. It actually is literally hard for us to describe. We don't know. But the problem, it's not the symptom. The problem is finding a language for it. You know, we also sometimes have trouble identifying what we're actually feeling. We may know something's wrong, but not have words for it. We may get overwhelmed by questions. Sometimes we just go blank when we're put on the spot. We may answer too fast just to get through the pressure, or we may answer too little because we genuinely do not know what to say. And when that happens, people can misunderstand us, and they do. You know, they may think we're anxious, dramatic, confused, or overacting. And that's where the dismissal starts. Not always out of cruelty, not always out of bad intentions. Sometimes just out of misunderstanding. But misunderstanding can still do real harm. Because once a patient is misunderstood, everything that follows can and will be affected. The tone changes, the assumptions change, the seriousness changes. What gets investigated changes. What gets brushed off changes. And that can be dangerous. I think another huge part of this is the emotional expression. You know, a lot of neurodivergent and trauma-affected patients don't express distress in the way most people act, you know. So it's not in a way that most people expect. You know, some of us, we get more emotional when we're overwhelmed, when we're scared, confused, or if we're in pain. Some of us cry, you know. Some of us, we panic, and we sound panicked. Some of us get flustered. Some of us struggle even more to speak clearly once the stress kicks in. You know, and then instead of that emotional expression being understood as distress, it may be interpreted as anxiety. Now, let me say this carefully, because anxiety is real. Emotions are real. Stress is real. But having emotion does not cancel out physical symptoms. Being overwhelmed does not mean nothing is wrong. Crying does not mean pain is not real, or the lack of. Panic does not mean concern is not valid. And yet, a lot of people have experienced that shift where once emotion enters the picture, the rest of what they're saying starts getting looked at differently. And that hurts. Because when you're already struggling to communicate, and then your emotional response gets used against your credibility, it becomes even harder to be understood. And once dismissal happens, the appointment is essentially over. I mean, the tone has changed, the assumptions have been made, the door has started to close, and at that point, it becomes incredibly hard to get anywhere because you're no longer being heard. You know? And then there's also the issue of timing. A lot of medical questions are very fast-paced, you know, and they often ask one right after the other. You know, what kind of pain is it? When did it start? Where is it? What makes it worse? What makes it better? Does it move? How long has this been going on? And you know, those are important questions. But if your brain needs time to process, organize, translate, and answer, that pace can be very hard. And when someone does not answer quickly or answers in a way that sounds uncertain, that can be misread too. It may look like they're unsure because nothing is really wrong. But sometimes they're unsure because they're trying very hard to answer accurately. There is a difference, and it does matter. Another reason neurodivergent and trauma-affected patients get dismissed is because some of us do not present in the way people expect us to. Some people are very expressive. Some are flat. Some minimize. Some laugh when nervous. Some completely shut down. Some can't make eye contact with you. Some will give you too much detail, or they can't pull out the important details fast enough. Some seem calm, even when something is seriously wrong. Some seem highly distressed, even when trying very hard to stay regulated. There is no one right way to look sick. There is no one right way to sound in pain. There is no one right way to explain fear. But I think sometimes healthcare still expects patients to fit certain patterns. And if we do not fit those patterns, we can be misunderstood. That is why this topic matters so much to me, because dismissal is not always about one big dramatic moment. It can be, but all too often sometimes it's the smaller ones. Sometimes it's a look, sometimes it's a tone, sometimes it's being talked over. Sometimes it's having your words reduced to stress or nerves before anyone has really understood what you're even trying to say to them. Sometimes it's leaving with the feeling that you failed the appointment somehow. And I think a lot of neurodivergent and trauma-affected people know exactly what that feels like. You replay the conversation in your head later. You think of the words you wish you'd used. You think of the details you forgot to mention. You think of the questions you answered badly. You think of the moment your mind went blank. And you carry that frustration with you. This is one of the reasons written notes can matter so much. This is one of the reasons preparation can matter so much. And this is one of the reasons people to bring that can be support for you, like an advocate, can matter so much. Because if communication is part of the barrier, then better tools can help. And that's really the heart of what I care about. Not blame, not attacking healthcare workers, not pretending this is simple. What I care about is helping bridge that gap. I want to help patients find better ways to communicate. I want to help providers understand that communication differences are real. Helping both sides meet in the middle. Because there is a middle. And I believe that when people understand each other better, care gets better. That's why this matters. If a neurodivergent or trauma-affected patient struggles to explain symptoms, that should not automatically lower the seriousness of what they are reporting. If a person is emotional, that should not erase the possibility that something physical is wrong. If someone goes blank, that should not be mistaken for not caring or for making it up. If someone sounds inconsistent, that may mean they need more processing time, more structure, or another way to explain. These are common communication issues for neurodivergent and trauma-affected people. Communication issues can affect outcomes. That is exactly why education matters. That is exactly why preparation matters. And that is exactly why I'm doing this podcast. Because I know there are people out there who have lived this and never quite known how to put it into words. And maybe this episode helps do that. Maybe this episode helps someone realize they are not weak, difficult, dramatic, or broken. Maybe they're struggling with something very real. Maybe they need more tools. Maybe they need more understanding. Maybe they need both. And maybe healthcare needs both too. So if you've ever been dismissed, I want to say this to you very clearly. Your struggle to explain yourself does not mean your symptoms are not real. Your emotions do not erase your pain. Your confusion does not make your experience invalid. And needing another way to communicate, that does not make you less worthy of good care. You still deserve to be heard. You still deserve patience. You still deserve effort. You still deserve answers. Thank you for spending this time with me today. I hope something in this episode helped you feel seen, understood, or a little less alone. Your voice matters. Your experience matters. And you deserve to be heard. Until next time, take gentle care of yourself, and let's keep healing out loud together.